don't feel like anything's out of bounds for you. If you do it well and you take your time and you take care with it, and like I said, you do your research and know how and why you're fitting in, you're allowed to do this. And you're
Hello, Writers and Crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 165 of the podcast. And it is September 25th, 2024, as we record this today. We're here with Jeanne Blasberg, and we're talking about story retellings. More on her in a minute. We'd like to thank our existing patrons for believing in our work here on the podcast and offline for all the other cool stuff we do. You can become a patron of the arts and us at patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, for books, writing instruction, coaching, planning. You can go to patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Segment 1. We should have like one of those intro, like, what do they call those? Those little tiny
music
sounds.
intro. Yeah. Actually,
Effect.
I have a son who creates those sounds as for his day job.
We'll have to get his link. We'll put the link in the show notes.
It's Sonic
We
branding.
have it in.
Sonic branding. All right.
Sonic branding.
Oh my gosh.
Hold on. I got to put that
That's
in
like
the
a band
notes.
from when I was in high school. Like that was my band in high school, Sonic Branding. Here we go.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. What are you up to? Eric, let's start with you. Yeah.
Boy, it's been a while since we've had this conversation. So I'm writing. I just finished a book that we're going to, The Accidental Stranger is out. I'm working on the print version of that as we speak. Client work, summer was really slow. So client work has been really picking up the last, I don't know. Well, September 1st, that's always the start date. It's like the racers are in their stances, and then like the gun goes off September 1st, and it's like
September always feels like the beginning of the year to me.
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that says that too. So but yeah, I'm finishing a rewrite on the next Strange Air book and kind of trying to keep all the client stuff in order. What about you?
I am home from Turkey, over jet lag, fingers crossed. Next weekend, I'm flying to Alaska to the writing conference there, and Alaska Writers Guild conference, in Anchorage. So I'll be there for a few days speaking at that conference and doing 2 workshops. And so I'm going to be working on client work and getting those presentations in order. That's kind of my world right now.
I'm going to give you the non-tour guide recommendation for Anchorage. You go to Club Paris.
Club Paris. Where am I supposed to write this down? We're on a podcast.
It's recorded. You have it. You'll just listen to it and you'll hear it again.
Club Paradise?
No, Club Paris.
Club Paris.
It was described to me as the most Tom Waits bar in Alaska. And when I walked in the door, it was the most Tom Waits bar in Alaska. It was unbelievable. It was like a piece out of time. You'll love it.
That's funny. Okay.
Yep.
And it's in Anchorage. All right, cool.
Yep. Right downtown.
And client work. That's what I'm doing. What about you, Jeannie?
Oh, well, I have been on our farm in Southwest Wisconsin. We grow veggies and it is big time tomato season. So I've been canning tomatoes for the last 3 weeks, and I was sad to leave the farm, but actually needed a change of pace. So I'm on the East Coast, embarking on some book events in New York and time with my children in Brooklyn this weekend.
How old are your kids now?
My oldest just turned 30 this year, so that's weird. And so I have a 30, almost 29, and 27-year-old.
Okay. Yeah, mine are just a hair younger. My oldest is 26, and then my youngest is, I think we laughed about this before we recorded. I think he's 23.
Yeah.
I have to do the math in my head. Maybe, yeah. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
I love the smell of canned. My mom used to can tomatoes, and that smell in the house is just,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I had the oven going. We have a like a convection oven, and when you put on a really low temperature, it's a dehydrator. So I had tomatoes constantly drying in the oven, sauces boiling on the stove, and then for a lot of our tomatoes we that we're going to be selling, we can't really process them in our kitchen because it's not deemed a commercial kitchen, but we can peel and freeze them. So
Mm.
there was we were going on all cylinders, including blistering red Italian fryer peppers on the grill and then taking the skin off of those and de-seeding them and freezing those for future use as well. So, yeah, it's a new operation. We will need to move into a commissary or a commercial kitchen at some point, but right now we're just trying to preserve our harvest, which was just bountiful this year.
Nice.
Hmm.
All right. Well, segment two.
Sonic branding.
Resources, tips, tidbits. What do you got, Eric? You got anything today?
I'm all out. I have
All
no
right.
resources. I'm tapped
No.
out. I'm going to try out something called Squibbler. If anyone has tried that out, maybe drop a comment, but uh
What
yeah,
does it
I'm
do?
going to
What is it?
it's like a new updated it's like a Scrivener lookalike, I guess.
A,
I was
a
offered
writing processor? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a
Word
writing
processor.
organizer. I don't know. I was offered a free year of it, and if I would try it out and see what I thought of it, and so I'm going to be trying that out. So I'll probably have that to talk about next time. But
This
um,
episode sponsored by Squibbler.
that's this world is full of that kind of branding too. Um, so yeah, we'll see.
Cool. I just want to plug one more time my friend Anna Willman's workshop. She's starting it September 28th, so right around the corner. And it is a 6 week course, Writing from Your Body workshop. I haven't done the 6 week version, but I've taken several of her Writing from Your Body workshops. She's done some for Willamette Writers, and I've also taken her private ones before. They're pretty amazing. You know, you come out of the sessions, the writing sessions, with like this whole new idea about how to access your body when you're writing. It's really amazing and interesting. So it's $40 a session, but if you want to do the whole 6 week course, then they discount it. So you can go to focusinginternational.org to sign up for the course, and there's a link in the show notes, and also a link that takes you to a flyer that tells you all about it. So that's my resource plug for the
I'll plug a
day.
tip. I've got a tip. Actually,
Mhm.
maybe it was the lack of coffee that here's a tip. We talk a lot about mindset client work. People talking about either getting into a side hustle or evolving a side hustle. In the last week, I have really learned the value of just knowing what you are willing to do and where you have to stop.
Like the
I just think that's
boundary.
yeah. I have had some pressure put on boundaries um from outside. The pressure from the inside is me. The pressure from the outside
That's
is
never
someone
going
else.
away.
That's never going away. But this one, like, I feel like, I've really had to reassert the whole, like, I get to say what I do.
Mhm.
I get to say what I don't do. And yeah, I just think it's really important to ground yourself in that
How do
from
you
time to
ground
time.
yourself before going into a situation that you know might be like, this person's been
That's
pushing my boundaries for a while. Hmm.
that's what I haven't learned yet. I've learned how to say, okay,
What
my
kind of a
boundaries
tip
are
is this, Eric?
no, well, you have just to start
Do
thinking
it, but I
about
don't know
it.
how to do it.
Just how to start thinking. You have to start thinking about it. You have
Yeah.
to start. Yeah, I have reflected on this. I've actually had a powwow with a writer colleague on the East Coast, and we just both said, yeah, we really have to have this conversation with yourself before you have to have the conversation. You have
Hmm.
to have the so yeah,
Just
I'm kind of
knowing what
living
your
in that world.
boundaries are.
Yeah, yeah, like this is the definition of what I do, and this is what I'm willing to do. And anything more than that, I need to be careful of careful of creating expectations. That's what I did. I ended up like doing more than the contract. So then
Hmm.
that creates the expectation that I now do more than I'm being paid for. And now
Mm-hmm.
that I'm having to pull back on a little of that because it's become out of control, it's like, well, why aren't you doing this anymore? Like, you're right. I guess I've set up that expectation. So anyway, just be mindful.
Yeah. And when you do face yourself with, when you're in that situation, a great way to address it is just having another conversation with the client. Like, hey, here's what I've been actually doing. And that's not actually my job description. So I apologize for giving you the impression that this is actually what, is part of the contract. So going
Yeah,
forward, this is the new expectation. And that clears up things. And yeah.
right,
Also,
right.
here's a tip off the back of that. I used to be one of those, I don't know if it must have been some version, mutated, like cancerous version of people pleasing. But
Mm,
whenever somebody asked me to do something, I'd be like, oh, sure. How hard could it be? That was actually the phrase in my head before I said yes. And so it was when I was co-hosting the Eugene chapter of Willamette Writers, and my co-host or co-chair, I guess, we had a conversation, and he was way more grounded, and he was way more into boundaries, and so we had a little conversation about like whenever you hear yourself think that, whenever that's starting to come up, that's your trigger phrase. Whenever you hear yourself say, "Oh, how hard could it be?" Say no.
right, right,
And
right.
the phrase, and then we pre-planned it. So like he's like, anytime you hear yourself saying that, always say, "That sounds like a cool idea. Let me check with my co-chair and I'll get back to you." Like, so that was the plan. So that was what actually got me out of that I don't know, obsessive yesing. Let me check
I
with my
like that.
co-chair.
Just having something to say that's a process that puts it in the other person's mind that this might is a decision that has to be made. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
So from my lack of a tip, you gave everyone a tip. I love it.
That's why we're so cool together, Eric. The beauty of co-hosting. Not to put you on the spot, Jeannie, but do you have any like tips or anything that you want to
Well,
resources that you want to
I
plug?
actually, while you guys were talking, I thought of something that I've really enjoyed in the last year. And it's actually something centered out on the West Coast that I've joined by Zoom. Um, I don't know if you're aware of Chris Frizzell and his book club.
Mm-mm.
It's called Frizz Lit, and it's actually a revisiting of classics. So I've read Dickens' Great Expectations. We reread Middlemarch, Herman Melville, and it's like going through chapter by chapter with the funny, witty, insightful group and led by kind of a fun and interesting kind of English literature type of take on it. And we read at a pace so that we can like really get into talking about these books slowly and not reading them too quickly. But so it's Frizzlit, Frizzlit, and I'm about to start a class on October 5th on Flannery O'Connor's short stories. And I'm
Fun.
always reading, but to revisit the classics in a way with like a
With the support.
conversational, yeah, in
Hmm.
a really like cool way. I didn't major in English in college, and so when I do read things, I'm often reading them by myself and knowing in the back of my mind I'm getting about 25% of what I should be getting out of this. Um, and so I highly recommend for readers and writers and listeners of your podcast to check this out because it's really been a wonderful thing, and my husband's been doing it as well. So we also, instead of talking about like the latest trashy streaming episode, we're often talking about the characters of a classic novel, which feels more erudite in the house.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a cool idea. I just looked it up too. So the link will be in the show notes. So awesome. Great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
as a recovering English major, it would have really been nice to talk about some of those things with that kind of group
Yeah,
rather than
like
having, like I'm not an ageist, but like when the 75-year-old professor that hung out with Faulkner,
yeah.
tells you what Faulkner means, there's not a lot of conversation to be had. You're just like, okay, there's no discussion.
Yeah.
So,
And then like one thing I really loved when we were doing Great Expectations or even Middlemarch, all of the leader of the class would do great not lectures, but have done research on the context, what was going on in that author's life at the time, and why do you think this character most replicated George Eliot, or like what were her beliefs and what was her relationship like and what did her house look like, and a tour, like just all the cool background stuff.
Hmm.
I love that part of it as well.
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sonic branding.
What are we reading?
Oh, I forgot about that part. What are you reading? I
Oh, I
was
guess
gonna
I had
go.
the
I was gonna go right into the main topic, but yeah, what are you reading?
um I picked up this really funny book about cryptids in North America. It's just like this state by state little, like there's like little articles about, I don't know, the Jersey Devil and all these weird monster legends that exist throughout the country. It's a pretty fun book. I mean,
What's it called?
I will have to look for that. I think it's
Well,
like North American Guide to Cryptids. Um, what's really cool about it is that it I live in Oregon City, Oregon. I live near a town called Boring, the United States of Cryptids. I live near a town called Boring. It's called Boring because that's where they used to bore holes in wood, not because it's lame.
oh, I always
But
wondered.
the North American the North American Bigfoot Society is like 5 miles from my house. I never knew this, and now I learned this from reading this book, The United States of Cryptids. And so, family field trip to the Bigfoot Museum is going to be happening this fall for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like how did I not know this was here? Like I love this stuff, and it's like so close that it's right near the pumpkin patch we always go. So I see
A
like a
linked,
paired,
yeah,
yeah, a
road
paired
linked road
October
trip.
Saturday or Sunday. Yeah. What
That's
about you?
awesome. Um, I am reading We Should All Be Millionaires, A
Hmm.
Woman's Guide to Earning More, Building Wealth, and Gaining Economic Power by Rachel Rogers. I listened to her podcast, so I was like, finally, I should probably read her book. And I
Hmm.
just bought the companion workbook yesterday. So that's my nonfiction. My fiction is The Horse by Willie Vlautin.
Oh, you're
Vlautin.
there.
I just saw him. He came to the bookstore and did a reading, and he's also a folk singer or a musician.
Richmond Fontaine.
So yeah, he sang some songs and did a reading and told great stories. Just yeah, it was a really enjoyable evening. So yeah, The Horse and We Shall Be Millionaires. The reason I'm still reading The Horse is because during travel time, first of all, there was hardly any time when we were in Turkey. It was just back to back to back stuff, errands, and cleaning out the house. And there wasn't any downtime. I thought there'd be lots of downtime, so I brought like 8 books. But no, I barely got through. And the only reading I did was on the airplane. And so I finished reading Ashley Poston's latest novel, Love Story, and a book called Strange Folk by Ali somebody. I'll put that in the show notes too. It starts with a D. So that's the new fiction that I read. But yeah, The Horse is still. I just picked it back up again this morning. It wasn't a travel read for me. I wanted something a little lighter.
I think you did this the last time you went there too. You're like, I'm gonna have all this reading time, and then I'm gonna
Well,
bring a
because
library.
sometimes it happens. Like the time before
Right.
that, I read like 13 books in 2 weeks or something. It was
Yeah.
crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah. What about you, Jeannie? What are you reading?
Um, so nonfiction, I just finished a book called Land Rich, Cash Poor by Brian Reisinger about a family's 100-year history on a mid-sized family farm. And also it talks a lot about our nation's broken food system, partly
Mm.
due to the disappearance of the mid-sized family farm. And for fiction, I'm currently reading Entitlement by Ruman Alam. He wrote Leave the World Behind, and this is his new fiction release that came out, I think, about a week ago. And mixed reviews. I'm like sticking with it, but I'm feeling like maybe it's a sophomore slump. Sorry.
Ah, what's the name again? I
Totally
will put
got
a
it.
link in the show
It's
notes.
called Entitlement.
Entitlement. Okay.
It's interesting because as I'm reading it, it really does share some themes with my most recent novel. So I'm intrigued to see where this novel is going, but it's going slowly for me. Um, but I'm sticking with it. I think I'm about 50 or 60% of the way through.
Okay. Now, the branding, sonic branding. Let me read Jeannie's bio and then we'll get into the topic. So, Jeanne Blasberg is an award-winning and best-selling author and essayist. Her novel, The Nine, was honored with the 2019 Forward Indies Gold Award in Thriller and Suspense, and the Gold Medal and Juror's Choice in the 2019 National Indie Excellence Awards. Eden, her debut, won the Benjamin Franklin Silver Award for Best New Voice in Fiction and was a finalist for the Sarton Women's Book Award for Historical Fiction. Her new novel, Daughter of a Promise, is a modern retelling of the legend of David and Bathsheba, completing the thematic trilogy she began with Eden and the Nine. She co-chairs the board of the Boston Book Festival and serves on the executive committee of Grub Street, one of the country's preeminent creative writing centers. Jeanne was named a Southampton Writers Conference Bookends Fellow in April 2021. She reviews contemporary fiction for the New York Journal of Books. And when not in New England, she splits her time between Park City, Utah, and growing organic vegetables in Verona, Wisconsin. Welcome to the podcast, Jeannie.
Well, it's already been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you enjoy like our little banter at the beginning.
No, I love it. I feel like I'm on a morning radio show or something.
That's
Oh
totally the
no.
vibe I want for the
Oh
Yeah,
podcast.
no.
like
That's
people are
awesome.
commuting to work and we're just having a good time laughing along. So I love that.
That's rad. I'm so glad you said that. All right. I am so interested in the idea of story retellings and why, why that sparks interest for writers and for readers. And yeah, I just want to get into the juice, if there's any controversy around story retellings, like, is that cheating or, like, yeah, I just want to know all about it.
Okay. Well, I love this topic, so I'm excited. And hopefully my answer won't be too long-winded.
Well,
But
we got some
re
time.
yeah, re retellings are really experiencing a resurgent in our culture, whether it's in
They are.
literature or plays. It's very exciting. There are a lot I can point to with regard to like mythology and in my case, a biblical retelling, but there are also so many retellings of classic literature, such as Percival Everett's recent retelling of Huckleberry Finn with
Mm-hmm.
James. There
Mm-hmm.
have been numerous retellings of Jane Austen and her and like novels that we just may have seen through one character's point of view. Um,
So I want to
and
stop you right there, just actually,
yeah,
because I have so many extra questions. I want to unpack that a little bit. So I do
okay.
want like kind of a definition of retelling. Like, is it, are spin-offs part of that, or is it telling the story like from a different character's point of view, or is it contemporizing? Oh my God, is that a
That's a
word?
tough word.
That's a good word.
So yeah, can you like start with kind of what your definition of
I
retelling
guess
is?
my definition does not really include the spin-off version. I think of like Ahab's Wife or
Hmm.
books that like March by Geraldine Brooks, where you're actually kind of creating a side story um based like from a character that's a minor character in the original story. That's a genre all of its own. I think in my case, I would define retelling to include um both a story in the original setting, but also in a different setting. I think it really has more to do with following a plot line and having the events of a story be similar to the original or exacting to the original, and definitely a parallel plot line. But the things that the author has the fun of changing to make it culturally more relevant to today or to make some sort of commentary about why the story is maybe even enhanced by telling it in a different way. You can play with settings. So for in my case with Daughter of a Promise, it's set in the time of David, King of Israel, thousands of years ago. I've now put them on Wall Street in year 2019, and David is the King of Wall Street, and
Mm,
Betsabé is a young woman who is starting out her adult life at his firm. You can, and then what also often done is that the story is told from a different character's point of view. So, I mentioned James by Percival Everett. That's the retelling of Huckleberry Finn from Jim the Slave's point of view. There are many cases where these retellings of Jane Austen novels are more feminist now, or from people's point of view of a different race, and that allows the writer to, yeah, make things contemporary, relevant, and the difference between the original. It's not a criticism of the original because that was culturally
okay.
relevant in its time, but it's now making, taking this classic plot and making it more, I guess, from in my case, I told the story in the first person from Betsabé, the woman's point of view, because it's the story of a relationship and a life that had originally been told from the male point of view. And it's also what's kind of really great about biblical retellings is that the stories in the Bible tend to be very concise and maybe only a few paragraphs long. So there's so much left out to question
Hmm.
and wonder about. So I'm able to fill in a lot of the white space with some of my own invention. And I really love that.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a thought as I was saying that, but um, the opportunity to retell is a fun journey to take the reader on or to go on with the reader because even if you're not I know even if you don't have a strong grounding in the Bible or some of classic literature like we were just talking about with the class that I signed up for, a lot of these plots are familiar to us in Western civilization. We have a certain familiarity with these stories. I mean, we kind of know where things are heading. Um it's an offbeat romance. It's a love affair that probably is not appropriate, right? We have this idea of a forbidden type of relationship, and we have an idea of where the story is going. And with a retelling, the author can also say like, "Whoop, we're not going there. We're going left instead of right." And the ability to insert or end the story at a different point is also
Mm.
a way to make commentary. And I've just always loved as a reader books that have rich texture in that they are in conversation with other works. So as a writer, it's an intellectual challenge and makes my art creation personally satisfying to feel like I'm in conversation with an earlier classic um, work in the canon. In my case, the story of David and Bathsheba comes from the book of Samuel, which is in the Hebrew Bible and is probably one of our civilization's earliest pieces of literature taken from oral history originally. So for me, that's just really inspirational.
I liked what you said about being in conversation with, like, it wasn't a, I don't know the word you used, but it wasn't a diss on the original work. It was like being in conversation with it. I thought that was really cool because I do know that there are some readers and authors that think that retellings are kind of cheating or what is the word that we came up with?
Derivative.
Yeah, I hate that word, but yeah,
I do.
and and I disagree. I don't think that retellings are derivative. I mean, I guess technically you're using the inspiration from another story, but like when are we not doing that for
I was going to
anything? You
say,
know,
there's
like
only a certain number of plots in this world. I mean,
right?
there are hero takes a journey, stranger comes to town. There's your basic
Hmm.
love stories of forbidden love or um, abandonment. I mean, really, where we as a human species process our lives through story, and I know how many like true plots that you can come up that in some way aren't derivative of another plot, even if you think you're the most original person in the world.
I
I've
totally
I've
agree.
had
Yeah.
teachers say it's one of two things. It's stranger comes to town or hero takes a journey. Like choose. It's so
I've always felt like it's kind of just an expression of fandom, really. Like the people like Wicked is is just a natural like it just answers a natural question. This character who comes on stage and is gone in an instant, like
yeah,
is
exactly.
like why would like I don't know. I think we're programmed to, especially when we're young, we watch things over and over and over again, and you start to play with the how did Boba Fett get into Star Wars? What's his story? Why is he beholden to this, other character? It's
Yeah.
just a natural extension.
The other thing I wanted to say about Daughter of a Promise is that well, first of all, I wanted to tell the story from the female point of view, like you were saying, there are these unanswered questions. And I want to show a love affair that is hard to understand because in the Bible, we do know that Bathsheba stays with David and has more children and eventually has Solomon, who becomes the king of Israel. So, like, there's some reason that they stayed together. But when I was really reading and studying this story of David and Bathsheba as part of a class, it was the height of the Me Too movement. It felt really relevant. It felt like this is a guy who would be seriously canceled right now. And I wanted to revisit it because it was also a way of saying our human struggle is really has never changed. All our trappings, the world around us, technology and the setting of our lives has changed dramatically. But when it comes to wanting to be loved, disappointment, wanting to be understood, desire, chemistry, love, I mean, I really don't think those things have changed that much. And so I find the referencing back to a 2,000, 3,000-year-old story the perfect way to show that as a species and as like our thinking consciousness is really very much the same as it's always been. And
That is,
also, yeah, for women, um, we have made gains and progress, but as I was writing and revising, Roe v. Wade was repealed, and I found myself thinking, have we really made that much progress? And Betsabe's journey in Daughter of a Promise is a commentary on maybe, the days of, I don't know. It's just a ability to reflect on male-female relationships, on desire, on power dynamics that have existed for a really long time, and why are two people attracted to each other when um, on the outside it looks like it's an inappropriate case of sexual harassment, but on the inside there's something that each of them are getting out of this relationship. And it's a gray area where our culture right now is kind of black or white on whether things are consensual or not, on whether things are right or wrong. This is a investigation of a relationship that's really complicated. And so um, I like as a writer relying on a plot that already existed because it's kind of fun to contemporize. I can't
Mhm.
say the word either. The um like the the plot line of a great army general and his troops in a war and turn that into like a modern day setting. I used COVID. It was actually very convenient for my plot. But to take that plot, make it modern day, and then really explore the relationships. Like as a writer, I'm really obsessed with the interaction between people. And so I can do a really deep dive there where and rely a little bit on the infrastructure that already existed and this like device that I'm having fun with making modern um, because those ancient works might have been more two-dimensional, like a Renaissance painting. And
Mhm.
now I'm trying to add that third dimension of sculptural, like what's this human experience? And so I think retellings can often do that as well. I mean, not, retellings of Greek mythology also can take something that feels two-dimensional and make it three-dimensional. Um, Retellings of classic literature don't necessarily get to do that, but they get to do other things.
I was gonna ask, like, if a writer is interested in doing a story retelling, what are the steps or tips? It sounds kind of like you just answered that, though. Take a
Well,
plot, make it modern day, explore the relationships. Is that
I
all there is to it, or?
absolutely not. I mean,
Okay.
I think that one thing that's really important is to do your research on all of the retellings that have been done of that story
Um,
and really like go to the library and find out why you're doing a retelling that offers a different point of view. And how, I mean, sure, we all have license to write whatever we want, but um, in my case, all of the retellings of David and Bathsheba have mostly been big film things with Elizabeth Taylor, and like there's really been nothing that got inside a young woman's head and had to decide whether she was gonna how she was gonna deal with this attraction, both the attraction that was beamed in on her and then some of the attraction she was starting to feel towards this older, more powerful man. And um, so I would say do your research. There have been so many retellings of certain works. You certainly would want to know how you fit and why you're different and why your retelling needs to be there. Because not only are you in conversation with the original work, you're in conversation with all the other retellings.
True.
Um, that's
So,
one bit.
so
But the
find out
other,
what hasn't been said.
yeah. But then like you can actually just do you can even just take a section of the story, or like we said, you could take a character and tell that minor character's backstory and what happened to them. So I don't know, there's lots of fun ways to do it. I just, I just think a retelling starts with really studying the original very closely and finding out where you think the questions exist and what are the, and also I feel like as an author, writing a book is just such blood, sweat, and tears. It has to also be something you're really driven to write about. So if a topic, or if you like, there's great retellings of fairy tales too.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a certain theme or a certain fairy tale or a story you've always questioned. I think that the retelling comes from that internal authorly question of why? I wouldn't just go out hunting for a story to retell because it has to be driven from something deeper that you want to accomplish. So just like with any long work writing project, um, I guess I wouldn't set out to write a retelling just for the mere point that I wanted to do a retelling,
Mhm.
but I would, if you're a person who's been obsessed with a certain cultural myth, and you want to turn it on its head because you have a different point of view, then retelling is the genre for you. But if you're looking for something to write and you're like, maybe I'll write a retelling, maybe I'll go look at a different plots. I feel like coming at it from the outside in might make it feel superficial.
Mhm.
Does that answer make sense too?
It does. I think that's where the quote unquote derivative parts come from. If you're just plugging into a plot because you want to, like you said, from the outside in, I think that superficial um, ness. Is that a
Superficiality.
word? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
That
English.
that almost feels like flash fiction, right? Like we're just trying to like fill in some of the stories, or some of the explanations. I really,
That's the criticism, and sorry, but that's the criticism in like big franchise comic books, and
yeah,
like, is this story just filling a hole because that's needed to be, or is it a story that is just, yeah, and that you see the fans talk about it, hear the fans talk about that, does the
yeah.
new
Well,
Aliens movie actually fill a need?
right. And one thing I think that's great that the retelling that that I'm a fan of does is, we're living in a world where people from different cultures, races, um, can change the main character of the voice or the voice of a protagonist or an antagonist in a classic work and show um, really show how the the work is enhanced. It's an enhancement, really, making it relatable to a whole population of readers now. I take mine and more. I do have a character who's Cuban American, but that's not really the point. The point is more that her voice is a feminist voice and it's a woman's voice. And I feel like so much of the Bible, and and I'm not like writing these things to be make a religious point. I'm writing more to make a point that in the ancient world, there's so many female heroines in the Bible, but that's not really um how it's spun. It's spun more of like the story of David and but really I see it as a series of very heroic women, and Bathsheba is just another one. And so um yeah, I just feel like um my desire to make that point is really is really something deep seated in me. It's a feminist work without banging you over the head with my dogma. There's a lot going on in this work, so I can rely on, the modern day retelling and all that I've done, but also make some points along the way. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting, like where that line falls. I'm sitting here thinking of, Kurosawa updating American Westerns and American Westerns, riffing on his movies, and like that conversation is what makes it meaningful versus, just a mere update. Like, we're going to update this for the screen here, or yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also, I mean, I don't want to like toot my horn as like this literary person, but you can look at a work of literary fiction, um, in that it's inserting um something, about it's going deeper and using prose to describe a character and that character's situation, in a way it's not just plot driven. And the thing about the Book of Samuel, it's entirely plot driven and action driven. He called for her, she laid with him, she sent him a message, I am pregnant. It's like, wait a second.
Right,
Are
There's
right.
a
you
lot
kidding
in
me?
there.
Like,
That
what
could
the
happen a
fuck?
lot of ways.
What was she thinking? She had a husband and like he did, and was she into him? Was this satisfying sex? Did she want to come back for more? Like, what is going on? And so I couldn't help it. Um,
So
anyway.
cool. I like those tips. So if you have an obsession with, a story that you grew up with, for instance, and or if you read something even now, first time, and you're left
Yeah.
with so many questions
Yeah.
like that you want to veer off
Yeah.
and consider. So when you say so going back to definitions, the retelling, for instance, if you wanted to see, okay, let's use Jane Austen. So there is a series of books where in Pride and Prejudice, it's all written from Darcy's point of view instead of Elizabeth's. So that is a retelling because it's the same events, the same plot, just told from a different point of view. But then where would like a spin-off is like there's another version because I'm all about Pride and Prejudice. So there's another series of books that take place after the wedding.
Hmm.
So that is not a retelling, that's a spin-off. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I bet there's a more elegant word than spin-off, but I think, yeah, it's inspired by
Okay, inspired
story
by.
of,
Hmm.
and it takes its roots in the story of, and it further explores these characters from, or, I think that, okay, I'm not like an expert on where the boundaries lie around the word retelling, but
Is there someone?
I don't know that there
No.
is, but let's not like I think that we have the right as artists to do these things, and even the scenarios that you just described that might be spin-offs, they are in conversation with. Um, I'll to go back to March by Geraldine Brooks. So the March husband who goes off to fight in the Civil War, he's now lying in I don't know, a hospital convalescing somewhere, and his wife and daughters are trying to hold it all together. And we all know the story of Little Women, but he's he's suffering and thinking about them and about, I find that to be really, really cool because the provider, the man, the father, the patriarch, like what were his thoughts while he was away from his family and had kind of abandoned them to the Civil War? That's interesting to me, but it's maybe a spin-off. But it's like, let's not get so caught up in the definitions,
Hmm.
and let's write about, if you want to, let's feel permission to make these works our own
Hmm.
because we have been raised on plot and story and myth and cultural myth and fairy tales and classic pieces of literature. Um, you know, Eric was talking about being a English major and all the works you read uh, as an English major. I mean, let's feel like they're not so far away and up on a shelf that we just dust off the covers and can't really touch them. I think that it's so much fun to insert our own thoughts in these in these plot lines and with these characters. And maybe other people don't think of that as fun, but I feel like as artists, we're in conversation with all sorts of things. As humans, we're in conversation with the world every day, and as artists, we're in conversation with other art. And that's how I want to be as an artist.
Yeah.
And
And
one of the great,
it's
yeah, go
well,
ahead.
it's part of the way art has evolved. If you go to Europe and go to all the big museums, you'll see how many depictions of the Virgin Mary, how many depictions of Greek gods, how many.
Mm,
It's a part of what we do. When TV first started, it was a lot of movies and television were just cinematic tellings of old plays and old familiar stories. So it's something that we've always done. But I feel like now, because we are so much more immersed in it, like the license to play with it is evolving. That definition we're searching for all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you may feel like you're exposing yourself to experts and scholars in the
Oh,
area who may then come at you with, well, blah, 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 you didn't, how did you address this situation? And so,
well, my book about this did
yeah,
not include
exactly.
that.
But can
Welcome to
I,
English major town. That's
yeah,
where.
I think I have um taken or felt the permission to revisit one of the, a real lightning rod piece of literature in the Bible. And I think that that's made me somewhat vulnerable, but I've gotten nothing but interest and curiosity on how I did it. I don't think I've gotten my wrist slapped at all by someone who's like, you're not allowed to touch that story or you didn't do it justice. And so I just want to say as a tip, don't feel like anything's out of bounds for you. If you do it well and you take your time and you take care with it, and like I said, you do your research and know how and why you're fitting in, you're allowed to do this and you're allowed to share it publicly and have a conversation. I mean, let's not feel like things are off limits and we're not good enough to touch that work or this work. I think it's
mm.
a don't be, there's a lot of fear when it comes to writing and sharing and publishing, but don't be afraid of this subject matter. If it's something that interests you, I think you should go for it. If it lights you up in the writing process, then you should do it.
That's awesome. What a great clip and a
Right.
lovely like ending point.
With some sonic branding, that would be
Yeah.
perfect. Um, but I would just say to like that fear of criticism or fear of, I think that, I don't know. I think sometimes that's an indication you've done it well. If you've triggered people who hold
Mm,
something, you know, this is this and the only way it can be. Well, if you've triggered that person, you've clearly you shaken them a little bit. And that's what art's supposed to do. It's not supposed to make everybody a five-star review person, you know. Sometimes that
mm.
upset person is what you want.
Good
Exactly. I don't
point.
want to write books that everybody likes either. But I want a good number of people to like them, but
Right.
they're not for everybody.
75%.
Yeah, seven enough people to cover my costs here.
Yeah.
So go to plug your book, The Daughter of
Right.
a Promise.
Yeah, I have a website, jeanneblasberg.com, that
Mhm.
describes all of my novels and links to where you can buy them. But you can find Daughter of a Promise and The Nine and Eden wherever books are sold. They're distributed through Simon and Schuster and available on Amazon and at most bookstores.
Awesome. And then are you anywhere on the socials where we
Oh
can?
yeah, I am an Instagrammer.
Yay.
At Jeanne Blasberg author. That's my primary place where I'm active. I also have a Facebook page with the same handle, Jeanne
Mhm.
Blasberg author. And in the last year, I've become active on Substack with a publication called Constantly Curating, where you can find the link on my website. But I do a weekly newsletter, combines my thoughts on the writing life and the farming life.
Nice. All right, on
There's some
Substack.
overlap there.
Farming and authoring.
It's all
Yeah, yeah.
creation. It's
It's
all
all
creation.
creation. I don't know. I feel like that sort of thing is like you get some immediate, you get to can tomatoes. That's an immediate gratification. Novels take forever. So
Yeah, head of
That's why
lettuce
you.
takes 40 days. That's pretty metaphorical. Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us, Jeannie. It was really fun. And I too like talking about this topic. So I'm glad that you led the conversation.
Well, Valerie and
absolutely.
Eric, it was so much fun. And again, I love talking about retellings and really getting into the craft conversation and some of the choices we make as writers. It's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a whole morning show concept, Eric, that we're gonna have to
We're gonna roll with this.
we're gonna roll with that. That's awesome.
We're going to change the logo because we need a little
Yeah.
splashier, drive
We'll
time
have to
with
talk
Eric
with
and
Sonic
Val.
branding.
Yeah,
Valerie,
yeah.
this means you're going to have to get up at 7 in the morning for all of your podcasts now with the coffee and the whole thing.
Yeah,
Like,
we do actually. This
give
is
the
our regular
traffic,
scheduled timing.
The
traffic and the weather report can be actual segments as well.
That's awesome. What was that on the TV show Community? Abed in the morning. Abed, what was the two guys in No One to
I
Watch that
never saw
show?
that show.
Ah, okay. I'll have to find that and put it in the show notes then. But they had a whole little morning show routine. All right. Well, that's it for now. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.
Good luck with
Bye
your
for now.
pets.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Ding.
All right. Enjoy your
Nice.
drive. Are you driving to New
Yeah.
York?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'm first going to Connecticut for an event tonight, and
Oh,
so
that's
that's
right.
about a 2 hour drive. It should be okay if I time it well.
All right. Well, safe
Nice.
travels, and we'll see you later. So we'll have this up tonight.
Oh,
So
wow.
it'll be out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll use the links and promote it as well. If
Okay.
Allison gets them or I get them,
Okay.
I'll do my
I'll
part.
send them to
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yep. See you soon.
All right.
Talk to you later.